This is a video which will show you the background and the theory about what's going on with the infrared remote control and infrared remote control detector or sensor. Before we do that, we have to understand what is infrared. Infrared is an electromagnetic wave. Now, to see an electromagnetic wave, this is an indication of an electromagnetic wave. This is the wave, and this is the electrical portion that's in blue. And the magnetic portion is 90 degrees perpendicular to the electrical portion. Now, this is an electromagnetic wave. First question that I have for you is, can you ever see this electromagnetic wave? Well, let's find out if we can. Well, these waves are different frequencies, and the frequency is really low and slow over here, and they're getting faster and faster and faster on this end. And there's an inverse relationship between the frequency and also the wavelength. This is the frequency here. So it's slow frequency and faster and faster and faster. And if we look at the wavelength, the length of the wave from one peak to another peak, and if that wavelength is 700 nanometers, yes, we'll see it. It'll be red. And if the wavelength is 400 nanometers from peak to peak, yes, we'll see it. It'll be violet. If the wavelength is about 500 nanometers, yes, we'll see it, and it'll be yellow. If the wavelength is longer than that, we won't see it. It'll be infrared. If the wavelength is longer, it'll be microwaves. And if it's longer, it'll be TV waves, or Wi-Fi waves, or radio waves. And if the wavelength is shorter than visible light, we won't see it. It'll be ultraviolet. Okay? Or we won't see it. It'll be X-rays. So the answer to the question is that yes, if it's within 700 nanometer wavelength and 400 nanometer wavelength, we will see it. If not, we won't see it. That's part of infrared. Infrared, we won't see it. So these are some of the devices that are in the electromagnetic spectrum. This is what we're going to be working with. Our remote control is similar to a TV remote control, and it's working in the infrared region. Okay, as the wavelength gets slower, it's radar, cell phone frequency, TV, etc. If the wavelength gets shorter, it's ultraviolet coming from the sun. So in the sun, we can see it, but there are frequencies that are higher. We won't see ultraviolet. They can do real damage to the skin. Okay. If the frequency is higher, the X-ray machines. So the frequency is higher and higher in this direction. And the wavelength, if we look at wavelengths on the bottom, the wavelength gets longer and longer. The wavelength over here of an AM radio station, like 880 on the dial, the wavelength is as long as a building. But on this end, in gamma waves, the wavelength is really short. It'll be as small as an atom. So what we're going to look at now is how we're going to use this spectrum and how you're going to use it in the experiment. So basically, here's the infrared remote control, and we're going to aim it towards the infrared sensor. And when we press a button, it'll produce a whole series of infrared pulses that we can't see. This sensor will convert the pulses to electrical signals, which we'll send to the Arduino. The Arduino has a program in there. It's going to look at the pulses and convert it into one of the numbers that was pushed, or one of the keys that was pushed. It'll send it into the Arduino IDE, and we'll look at it on the serial monitor. And so if key 1 was pushed, a series of pulses will come through, a 1 will be displayed. And then if we push number 2, series of pulses, converted infrared pulses, converted to electrical pulses, converted by the program, and to display a 3. That's the object of this experiment. We're going to learn about infrared. We're going to learn about running a program, and we're learning about using the serial monitor on the Arduino.